But tell me why I can't...
No, there is no why. Nothing more will I teach you today. Clear your mind of question.
To most, Grand Master Yoda is seen as a genius, a wise leader and an insightful mentor, training Luke in the ways of the Jedi and serving on the Jedi Council for centuries during the era of the Republic. Yoda was responsible for guiding the Jedi Order and was personally involved in the training of all Jedi at various points in their learning. But in reality, he was nothing more than a complete and utter idiot. His willful blindness during the era of the Republic was instrumental in the fall of Anakin, and, by his own admission, he was complicit in the fall of the Republic and the Jedi Order. However, his failure goes even further, and it can be argued that Yoda, above any being alive, was responsible for not only the Jedi's inability to stop Palpatine and the rise of the Empire, but even the start of the Clone Wars themselves. And I aim to prove that Yoda was not, as it may initially seem, a good leader for the Jedi, and that his actions had a perverse and irrevocable impact on the galaxy. Furthermore, I will try to establish that if Yoda had not been so blinded by his own fear and arrogance that neither Dooku nor Anakin would have turned to the dark side, and perhaps the Republic and Jedi may have never fallen.
Your arrogance blinds you, Master Yoda.
Before we begin, I just wanted to take a moment to thank Vite Ramen for graciously offering to sponsor this episode today. Vite is just an awesome service. They have just some of the best noodles out there. They are super tasty, absolutely amazing stuff. Something like 50% less sodium than other competing ramen companies, or takeout, way healthier than takeout, and in my opinion, absolutely taste better. They are a little bit more expensive than other ramen competitors that you would find at the store, but that does go to the fact that they do pay their employees a living wage, which I think is awesome and totally worth the higher price tag. Plus, you are getting better ingredients and just better flavor and stuff like that. And the portion sizes are actually adequate for a full meal. So totally recommend Vite Ramen. Because they are a little more expensive, we are giving 10% off to anyone who uses the promo code LoreStar by clicking the link in the description. Again, promo code LoreStar. Thanks again to Vite Ramen. They are totally awesome, and I highly recommend that you try them out.
Long time fought I did, consumed by fear otherwise.
You were afraid?
Yes, afraid. Surprised, are you?
Now to start, we have to first look at the era of the Republic and start with the Jedi's fall. While I believe that it would certainly go back further than this, the earliest evidence we have is during the initiation and Padawanship of Dooku. Dooku was a young Jedi of noble blood born to the ruling house of Sereno.
He is a political idealist, not a murderer.
He was taken in by the Jedi at a young age after his father had discarded him when he found out that his son was Force sensitive. Most Jedi initiates are not told anything about their family or even what planet they're from, and Dooku was no exception. However, he discovered this quite by accident when he had a chance encounter with his sister and would eventually meet his still embittered father. Dooku was understandably upset that the Jedi had not told him where he had come from, believing that the Jedi should be allowed to know their heritage and history. Yoda's defense of this came in the form of a lecture about attachments, preaching that the Jedi should have no connection to anything that could possibly hold them down or compromise their impartiality. This idea was the earliest seeds that we can see of Yoda's advice given to Anakin.
Mourn them do not, miss them do not. Attachment leads to jealousy,
which caused him to keep his relationship with Padme secret and force him to rely on Palpatine as his only confidant.
It's upsetting to me to see that the Council doesn't seem to fully appreciate your talents.
Once Dooku had established a relationship with his sister, the two of them remained in regular contact with one another and would continue to do so for the duration of Dooku's apprenticeship. His sister would share with him the galaxy as she saw it, and Dooku got to see what the actions of the Jedi looked like to those outside the Order. This contact led to a sense of grounded compassion in Dooku that other Jedi just didn't have, and it became obvious that Dooku was able to see the galaxy through the lens of the average civilian, and he was able to more compassionately see the consequences of the Jedi's actions throughout the galaxy. Now, this led to many arguments between Dooku and his Master Yoda, with Yoda claiming that the Jedi should always be able to remain detached in order to maintain impartiality. However, Dooku disagreed, pointing out that the Jedi were clearly too detached to act with the appropriate dedication and compassion.
The rest of the Jedi are so detached and they've become so political that they've really lost their way.
Yoda's reasonings for this had long ago become second nature, and it should be noted that with the Jedi, they were not always as detached as we see them during the last days of the Republic, with Yoda being largely responsible for this shift. Over the course of Yoda's lifetime, he had seen many Jedi make poor or unwise decisions due to the attachments that they harbored in their hearts. While it was always the way of the Jedi to be attached primarily and most crucially to the Force alone, the idea of total segregation arose out of fear, and as Yoda rose in authority among the Jedi, he continued to advocate for more and more detachment. Now this makes some amount of sense from Yoda's perspective, as he is around 900 years old by the time of the prequels. Think for a moment about living that long, that everyone you grew up with, your childhood friends, your Jedi Master, your first apprentice, then your second apprentice, how many generations you have outlived and watched die. It becomes so easy to see how someone as old as Yoda, someone who had outlived so many friends and fellow Jedi, would become callous to the thought of attaching yourself to anyone else. Surely he would have recognized the pain he felt after each death, pain that could, if not properly addressed, lead to the dark side. Dooku words this very well in a quote from Star Wars: The Clone Wars novelization, saying, "The Jedi Order's problem is Yoda. No being can wield that kind of power for centuries without becoming complacent at best, or corrupt at worst. And he has no idea that it's overtaken him. He no longer sees all the little cumulative evils that the Republic tolerates and fosters. From slavery to endless wars, he never asks, why are we not acting to stop this? But if you live alongside corruption for that long, you will no longer notice the stench."
Have you come to free us?
No, I'm afraid not.
Yoda's discouragement of attachments was a way to build a wall around the law, so to speak. And it was not the detachments that were wrong, nor the pain of loss. It was only what you chose to do with that pain that was dangerous.
Love doesn't lead to the dark side. Passion can lead to rage and fear and can be controlled, but passion is not the same thing as love.
A sentiment also voiced by Dooku on numerous occasions. Yoda's famous line, "Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering," is a perfect example of this. He considers fear evil because of where it leads, but notice from another conversation that Yoda has with Anakin about his visions,
"The fear of loss is a path to the dark side."
He says that the fear of loss is a path to the dark side, but not the dark side itself. Dave Filoni himself even addresses this in The Gallery, the Mandalorian behind-the-scenes special on Disney+, where he talks about Anakin's need to have a Jedi Master who would be a father figure to him, and a Jedi who has not yet given up on attachment.
Because Qui-Gon hasn't given up on the fact that Jedi are supposed to actually care and love, and that's not a bad thing.
The Jedi, with their damnable sense of over-caution, would tell you love is something to avoid. Thankfully, anyone who's even partially alive knows that's not true.
Now in Attack of the Clones, Yoda starts to see that the Jedi Council has already lost their way, and that fear has started to enter into their hearts. And his mentality is further explored throughout the animated series. However, by this time, it is already too late for Anakin. Yoda pointed out in The Phantom Menace that Anakin had already formed an attachment with his mother, and it would forever be impossible for him to live totally detached. Qui-Gon represented an older view of this, believing that the Jedi needed to have the ability to care and attach themselves in order to be truly effective and compassionate guardians of peace and justice.
And how do you deal with the bad part of love is what determines your character. What determines the dark side's hold over you?
We know that Anakin was the type of Jedi destined to form attachments, and that the Jedi could either stifle this or teach Anakin how to address those attachments in service of the light.
Controlling your passions while being in love, that's what they should teach you to beware. But love itself will save you, not condemn you.
Qui-Gon understood this, and he would have taught Anakin how to control his passions while being in love, to not build a wall around the law, but rather to stand firm in the face of temptation. As we mentioned earlier, Yoda has seen so much loss and failure in his lifetime, and he believed it was easier to simply avoid attachments altogether, rather than trying to teach each Jedi the nuance and complexity required to balance attachment and peace. Qui-Gon was reverting back to an older philosophy, a philosophy that Yoda had all but condemned as a path to the dark side. Much of Qui-Gon's views were certainly learned from his Jedi Master, Dooku.
Well, one might say he was always a bit out of step with the decisions of the Council. Much like your old master, Qui-Gon Jinn.
Really?
Oh, yes, they were very individual thinkers. Idealists.
Who famously believed that the Jedi needed to have compassion and emotional investment in order to be proper servants of the galaxy. Of course, just as was the case with Anakin, this put Dooku at odds with the rest of the Jedi, and he would eventually leave the Jedi Order, openly rebuking the Jedi for being too detached. He condemned their indifference, pointing out that the Jedi were now serving only as lackeys for the Senate and the Chancellor.
You are wrong, Master Yoda.
Leaving the Order, you are.
I have no choice.
And what of your duty to the Republic?
The Republic is changing, Yoda. Has changed. We all know it, even if we won't admit it. A moment ago, Master Castana told me that the Senate would happily send what is needed to process our new resources. I have no doubt that is true. And yet the very same Senate refused to help when my sister begged them to stand against the Abyssin. The Jedi refused to help.
Dooku left because the detachment of the Jedi had neutered them and rendered them useless, a philosophy of detachment prominently espoused and glorified by none other than Master Yoda. Dooku left the Order because Yoda's own views on attachments. Further, it is heavily implied that if the Jedi had been more involved in the pursuit of justice and less conforming to the shackles of politics, then the separatist movement would not have even begun. Instead, the Jedi gave Palpatine the pieces that he needed to set the stage for the Clone Wars, and as pawns of the Senate, the Jedi all too eagerly took on the role of Jedi generals at the behest of the Chancellor.
Then came war. In our arrogance, join the conflict swiftly we did. Fear, anger, hate.
Yoda's philosophy on attachment, paired with the power and sway that he held within the Jedi Temple, ensured that the Order would cast out any Jedi with a level of compassion and care required to truly serve the galaxy, and those who did would either leave the Order or turn to the dark side, not possessing the training and guidance required to properly apply these attachments in service of the light. Yoda was consumed by fear during the final days of the Republic, but he would eventually come to realize this on his own.
Consumed by the dark side, the Jedi were.
While Yoda's actions may have caused more harm than good, true wisdom is accepting correction and learning from our mistakes. And we see by the time of 4 BBY that Yoda has come to understand his failure during the era of the Clone Wars, and he admits to the fear that ruled him during that time. By the time we see him in Empire Strikes Back, he has grown in wisdom and understanding far beyond that which he held in the comfort of the Jedi Temple. Conflict, discomfort, and the breaking of the status quo all serving as a forge that would reshape Yoda into the wise master we see in Empire. Still, Yoda held on to one fatal flaw: his fear of attachment.
Is Darth Vader my father?
Rest I need. Yes. Rest.
In Yoda's final moments, he confirms that Luke must now face Vader, and he laments that now Luke knows the identity of his father.
Unexpected this is. And unfortunate.
He worries that this will cloud Luke's vision, and it will not allow him to do what he believes must be done.
I can't kill my own father.
Then the Emperor has already won.
But it is only by rejecting Yoda's advice that Luke actually succeeds. If he had listened to Yoda and Obi-Wan, if he had possessed the resolve and detachment necessary to kill his father, then the Emperor would have truly won.
Good.
But ultimately, I want to know what you guys think. Do you agree that Yoda's fear of attachment is what ultimately led to the fall of Dooku and Anakin? And what do you think about Luke rejecting this teaching about attachment in Return of the Jedi and allowing his love for his father to end the conflict? I'm also going to be doing a Q&A soon, and as a thank you to all my loyal friends who made it to the end of the video, you can leave a comment with the hashtag AskBigZ, and your question may be featured in the upcoming video. Let me know all this down in the comments below, because I want to know what you, my friends, have to say about our favorite galaxy far, far away. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, may the lore be with you, now and forever.